We will bring the Assembly Finance Committee to order for December 1st, 2025. And I believe we will have Ms. Wall on Zoom that will work with that. Madam Clerk, I'm just going to call you Madam Clerk instead of Ms. Wendell. That's what I'm used to. Would you call roll?
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. We have all Assembly members present in chambers besides Assembly Member Wool, who is available on Zoom, and Assembly Member Smith, who is absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Going to approval of minutes. Mr. Kelly, have you read the minutes this time?
I move approval of the November 5th, 2025 minutes and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, those minutes are approved, which leads us to agenda topics, and I'm going to make one slight difference. I'm going to swap 7 and 8, so we finish our meeting with retreat preview to warm us up for Saturday. All right, with that, agenda topics item number 1 under agenda topics number 2 on our list, foregone revenue. Ms. Flick.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. We are on page 9 of the packet. I'm going to give some highlights of the foregone revenue, and the intent is not to dig into every single item in the packet today, but rather to provide an overview of the various exemptions, rebates that are currently provided for in code or through programs. This is directly related to your goals. One of your implementing actions under goal number 3 is to examine the purpose and effectiveness of city tax code and policies resulting in tax exemptions, tax credits, or any foregone revenue. So that's what we are doing today. There are over 50 various exemptions provided for in code, both for property tax and for sales tax. I have grouped these in this memo kind of in things that are alike. So the first grouping are things that you don't actually get to control. Those are exemptions that exist by another body, which is passed down to you. The only element in this grouping that you do control is with respect to the senior and disabled veterans state mandated property tax value reduction. There is a deadline by which people need to file for that. Those who file past that are submitted to you for approval. And so your decision to approve them or not in that current year in which they submit is completely at your discretion. But if they file timely, they are granted that exemption. The next grouping is everything that is a credit or rebate that's based on a dollar threshold. Most of these don't have an inflator involved or a sunset time or a reset prescribed in code. Many of these haven't been touched in years. And so this is an area where we can certainly look at various items. I will say number 10 on the list, the dollar cap on a sale of a single good or a single service. Just before I came down for this meeting, this is one that every 2 years gets adjusted, and our sales tax team is on the ball and getting that ready to roll out for January 1 because it gets adjusted every even year. So January 1 of 2026, it would be adjusted. The next group is credits or rebates that are on a series of properties that don't follow kind of the normal home titling process. So we've got motor vehicles, vessels. These are items which, when they're sold, don't go through the state for titling purposes. Number 14 in here is just an item that we as staff struggle with, and so we wanted to include it on the list. Manufactured homes are taxed as real property, just like other homes, other property, but they are not titled through the state regular natural resources. Rather, they go through the Department of Motor Vehicles. And so we often find ourselves in cases where we end up with delinquent taxes with somebody who's a new owner, and they change titleship at DMV but never inform the city. So we don't have that same route of information. It's not a huge dollar value. In '24, just a stat that I had available, manufactured homes that are in a mobile home park represented $467,000 worth of property taxes. So we're not talking about a huge property tax value. The next set of exemptions, 15 through 17, deal with health or other areas of required expenses in our journey of life. So medical type things and burial type things. The next group is related to nonprofits or uses that are deemed as kind of good for the community. So this is where you have membership dues, sales made by governments or the public subdivisions, nonprofits, things like that. The last group on page 11 is related to exemptions or credits with the flow of goods through CBJ. So where the property doesn't stay here or may not even originate here, but flows through the city on its journey to its end location. The next to last group on page 12 of the packet are a series of exemptions and credits that are related to economic development. Most of these are real property. And then the 31 through 47 is a whole host of things that just aren't like the others, and so they ended up in a potpourri group at the end. Just a group of random various things that we have as exemptions and credits. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Fleck. And I'll remind everybody, we do have a little subgroup working on this with Ms. Huscanes, Mr. Steininger, and myself. So, and just to give you an idea how deep we're diving into it, I think we put up to about 4 hours now, almost close to 4 hours of work. So if you have anything specific, send it to Ms. Flick's way, and if it's something different than what we've already looked at, then we will figure out a way to air it publicly before because we are a group of 3, but I'll take any general questions at this time. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I guess what is the timeline this group of 3 is looking at for bringing something back to the full assembly?
As time allows, I think. I don't know that we've set up a big time frame. As everybody knows, next week we're going into Alaska Municipal League, and then we'd probably be on the holidays, so I don't know if we'll be able to meet in December again, or January might look a little bit better. So Ms. Flick has quite a bit of homework that we gave her to do, so it's when she can find time also. So. Seeing no further questions? Excellent job, Ms. Flick. We'll move on to our next item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next item is for information on the dockage fee usage. So you'll recall a while ago, the dockage fees were increased, and the anticipated additional revenue, you had requested that we come back and bring some potential uses for those. We estimate that the additional revenue generated will be roughly $2.9 million. And as part of this decision to raise the dockage fees, you all also noted that you wanted to have all of the docks then pay for their security, restrooms, and maintenance. And so part of the increased dockage fees would remain with docks in order to cover those expenses that they now have to pay for on their own and would not be getting marine passenger fees for. So that leaves us about $2.2 million estimated additional revenue for FY27. As we've talked about before, typically when an enterprise fund has increased revenue, that revenue stays with the enterprise fund. It is raising fees to provide a service. And as we talked about earlier this year, where there is a clear relationship between the fees that are being collected and potential uses. There might be opportunity to transfer funds out of the Dock Enterprise Fund to another fund to accomplish something that's related to the generation of that revenue. So we have folks coming in off of a boat, and when those folks come to Juneau, they touch a lot of things within our community. And so there are some options that we have that we could utilize some of those funds. Part of the direction that I had was to not try to offset marine passenger fee funds, because those are already established. We've got a specific use for those. So I would let you know that I had many conversations with folks. I'll start with the port director, who, as the director of the enterprise, said, yes, we should leave those funds within the enterprise. We have a long list of things that we would like to do with those funds, and it would make sense. So that is certainly an option that you have. It's important to note that the dockage fees are recurring, they're operating in nature, so we could use them to offset operating fees. Through an allocation process, we take marine passenger fees and apply them to transit, to fire, to police for the increased burden that they have in the summer with all of the increased folks coming in. It doesn't quite offset all of their increase in cost in the summer months, so we may potentially be able to take some of the dockage fees to make JPD or CCFR whole above what the marine passenger fees allows, because those are more restrictive. So that could be one area. At a quick estimation, we think there's probably $1 million or so in operating general fund dollars that we could offset there. We could also, one of the things that pops into mind is, oh, we've got all these buses on the road and the buses tear up our roads. A lot of those buses are on roads that we don't maintain, so they're maintained by the state. So while at first glance it's like, oh, we could do some great road rehabilitation, actually where there's that nexus of those passengers coming off the boat, those are roads that we don't actually maintain. So we have some more stones that we can overturn, but there were some, just a handful of obvious operating type expenses that we could offset. The other thing that we have plenty of are project-related expenses, and that can be anything from, the state wants to redo South Franklin. We've got utilities down there, so those water and wastewater lines that all of these folks coming off the boat utilize, that could be a fine project to direct some funds to. Basin Road gets a lot of tourist activity. There's a lot of work that can be done on that. And, as another idea, the gondola fits within kind of having that nexus where we're anticipating that folks coming off the boat will be primary users of the gondola in the summer. So that could be a way to supplement funding needed on that project as well. So this memo isn't the be-all, end-all of places that we could look to utilize those dockage fees, but it's a starting place for us to begin a dialogue and take whatever direction you have for us.
Thank you, Ms. Flick. Who has questions? Mr. Steininger.
When you talk to our Docks and Harbors director, and his response was, there's plenty of things that we could spend this money on. I'm thinking, the opportunity cost of using this elsewhere. Those plenty of things. Are they kind of new concepts for Docks and Harbors, or is it, hey, we need to fill some holes in our defer maintenance savings, or, are these things that he was planning to spend the money on that we eventually are going to have to spend money on no matter what, or are they new nice to haves?
That's a great question, Mr. Steininger. I think it's a combination of both. The docks and the harbors that are utilized by the tourists coming off of the boats, there's a long list of maintenance type activities that will need to be done and will need to continue to be done. Many of those can be funded through the marine passenger fees. There are, I think there's lots of funding opportunities, but it's, certainly as an enterprise, if they're bringing in revenue, caring for their own facilities is a normal method of using those funds.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is a bit conceptual, and if you remember the last time we talked about this, you might see a continuation of thought. So when we talk about the nexus between this is the enterprise, this is, we provide a service, this is where we're getting the money for, this is some obvious ways that they impact the community. Could you talk a little bit about that? When you say nexus, for instance, I guess I'll give you more context. For the marine passenger fees, we have a cost allocation, we have a settlement, we have somebody come in, we have formulas, and we can say we can justify this much, and this is why we put exactly this much towards these different other funding categories. Is the way we're talking about this more of a like GASB red face test type thing? Just like hypothetically, if we wanted to take this whole amount and put it in a specific CBJ funding thing that you don't see an obvious nexus, what would prevent us from doing that?
Ms. Flick.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Assemblymember Hughes Candies, the marine passenger fee funds are very restrictive, and they're restrictive for a number of reasons, including the Settlement Act. And you're right, we have a very prescribed way of working through that process and how those funds are used. This is, what we're talking about is a little less restrictive, and yet needs to, I think you put it well, pass the red face test. We need to be able to clearly articulate why funds generated here can be spent over here. And I think as long as we can articulate what we're doing and why we're doing it, you as the assembly have the ability to make transfers. And so we would, you can make those decisions. But certainly what we would be looking for is some sort of a touch point where we can say, these folks or these activities that are generating revenue, it makes sense that we can spend it over here or over there.
Do you have a follow-up, Ms. Hughes Candies, or do I move on?
I guess just a follow-up, if I'm looking for that consequence, because it makes total sense to me, and I think red face test I can wrap my mind around. But what if it doesn't pass the red face test? I guess I'm trying to find the other wall.
So I think, you have an idea?
Robert, it's going
Mr. Barr,
bring me back to earth.
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Hughes Candies. I think it's a risk analysis in the legal realm.
Say that again.
I think it's a risk analysis in the
Okay.
legal arena.
Yeah, that's helpful, those words. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is kind of to piggyback on what Alicia was talking about.
That would be Ms. Hughes Candies.
Assembly Member Ms. Hughes Ganges. Sorry. So it, the red face test essentially, is how justifiable it is. I think it would be pretty justifiable to say that Treadwell and Sandy Beach is an attraction of a type as well too, and therefore could that justify that these fees be used to build a whole brand new bathroom facility over there and update the dock and repave it over there as well.
Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Assemblymember Brooks. I think the question ultimately is just thinking about in making that risk analysis, who is going to object to the use of the funds, and then countering that with whatever justification you as a body might have for the use of those funds that makes sense, that connects that nexus between its expenditure and its initial collection. And you as the assembly can certainly make that argument, and then we will implement it, and if needed, your attorney will defend you.
Thank you.
Madam Manager.
I just will add to that analysis as you all do this risk analysis. We have had a couple of cruise lines say, we think these should be as restricted as passenger fees. And we're like, nope, we don't agree with you on that. So, you know, when you think about like, what does the red face test look like? I also think that there's just plenty of expenditures that clearly are more, that clearly have a nexus. You know, we don't have a shortage of things to spend general fund on.
Mr. Burks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier, you're speaking about, you know, how the marine passenger fees, you know, being used for emergency services. And, you know, that's a historical precedence that's taken place. How much could be used for emergency communication system that we're currently redoing?
You can do that, Director Flick.
That's a good question, Assemblymember Brooks. We probably could use some towards that because certainly the emergency responders are using a communication process in the summer with the additional influx of people. So that certainly could be a project that we could look to, you know, see what the funding need is and if it makes sense to use dockage fees for that.
Thank you.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One more. The dockage fees, when we talked about it related to the marine passenger fees for the restrooms and security. So you said, I wanted to verify that I understood you correctly. The enterprise will retain the funds necessary to pay for the docks that are ours.
That is correct, Ms. Hughes Candies.
And then, thank you, and then follow up, and then the other ones, as part of that, that's just for ours, is that correct? I went back and saw how confused I was in that meeting, and it was very confused. So I'm just making sure I understood correctly.
Director Flick.
I don't have the minutes in front of me, but the restatement in my memory is that all of the docks charge a dockage fee, and they should be charging enough to cover their expenses. And so putting our docks on the same playing field where they can cover their own expenses, we wouldn't have to use marine passenger fees for restrooms or security or maintenance for any of the docks then.
Thank you. That's such a good way to phrase it. I would have gotten it the other meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just backtracking a little bit here, a hypothetical popped into my mind on the marine passenger fees for the emergency communications. Let's say that we're able to cover a majority of what the cost would be to implement the new system. What would then come about the voter-approved bond for the same project?
Director Flick.
So I would, we have already sold the bonds and we're under obligation to pay those back, and they are restricted for solely the use of that public safety communication project. So I would have to go back and look at all the bond documents to see if they're callable, if we could pay them back early. I would suspect not all of them would be. So certainly there's there's always a risk of holding on to cash that we received from the proceeds of a bond sale, because we run into issues with the IRS if we're holding on to cash that are on tax exempt bonds. So municipal bonds are tax exempt. So the communications project, I want to say, is roughly $24 million. The bonds are covering about half of that. These dockage fees, you have about $2 million next year to work with. So I think that the bonds would be retained as part of the funding for that project. And I don't know the exact amount, but I know that they also have grants involved in that project. So those would, we would want to use those restricted funds for that project before we use these dockage fees that could have multiple uses to offset that.
Thank you. That's great information.
And as I recall, in Public Works, I don't know if it was you, that somebody's going to give us an update on where we are with that project. I don't remember who it was, but someone was.
We will make sure you get an update.
Yeah. Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Madam, excuse me, thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a motion or to throw out if the moment's right for that, unless there's more questions.
I don't see any further questions, so throw out your motion.
Okay, I'm gonna give this a try. I'll move that the assembly direct the manager, to, in the FY27 budget, utilize any dock fees in excess of dock operations to offset general operating expenditures to the fullest extent possible, and then bring us back a list of potential projects to use any of the remainder of the funds. And if I could speak to that motion, maybe I can clarify just a tiny bit.
Okay, would you speak to your motion, and would you define a little bit general operating? That is for the city, correct? Not the docks and harbors.
General operating for the city. So my idea would be, whatever is left over after docks have taken care of their infrastructure, that we take that excess funding, and as much as we can, the manager has given us some options here. It sounds like they're still kind of working through where, police and fire, some other, maybe transit, maybe some other things. The most money that we can use to fund those ongoing expenses, we do. Anything that we feel like is extra that we can't apply to operating, come back with some proposals on projects that are priorities that we could spend these funds on. When we started this conversation about bringing in additional revenue from the visitor industry, this was, I believe, the Assembly's intent at the time was the community sees the cruise industry as not providing enough benefit to our community, or that many people in the community think more benefit should come to the community. They get frustrated when we tell them about the restrictions of marine passenger fees. This is more flexible funding for us to use to fund our city services in a time that is, that we're, strapped for funding. They'll do that. So this would kind of maximize our ability to do that. And I'll stop there.
Okay, before I ask for an objection, do you want to restate your motion one more time?
Sure. I move the Assembly direct the manager to, in the FY27 budget, utilize all dockage fees in excess of docks operations to offset CBJ general operating expenditures to the fullest extent possible, and bring back to the AFC a list of potential project uses for the remaining funds.
All right, thank you for that. Objection, Ms. Adkisson.
Objection just for purpose of the question, because I'm pretty sure I like this motion. Just to be crystal clear, when you say funds in excess of dock operations, you're referring to the 700,000, correct?
I think it was more than that, but now I don't have it in front of me, so.
We're going to phone a friend and look at Director.
Yeah.
Ms. Atkinson, yes, we anticipate the docks needing $700,000 what they've gotten in the past for marine passenger fees.
Perfect. Okay.
So-
We weren't giving them additional because I know the port director had indicated interest. So with that, I'll remove my objection. I support this motion.
Can I make sure now? I'm not sure I'm clear. The memo says, estimating $2.2 million of new revenue. And so I'm talking about that funding.
Okay, Director Flick, Are we all in agreement that we've given $700,000 extra to docks and harbors? We have this 2.2 million, and that's the number we're talking about.
That is correct, Madam Mayor. We expect the increased dockage fees to be 2.9 million. Docks will retain 700,000 for their security, restrooms, maintenance. That leaves about 2.2 million that can be allocated as Ms. Wall described.
Okay, and Ms. Wall is nodding her head, so she's in agreement with that. Ms. Atkinson, you maintain your objection? Mr. Steininger, and then Ms. Hall.
Thank you, and I guess I'll object just for the purpose of maybe a comment or a request, I guess, and pulse the body on this. So within that motion, if I understand correctly, some amount of the 2.2 million will go towards kind of that maximization of offset, and there likely will be some left over, with which Ms. Wool's motion would then direct towards projects. I guess I'd like to see within those project options, some that may come from the port director's list of priorities. I know I've had expressed to me a lot of complaints about, Mr. Brooks brought it up, the restroom facilities at the South Douglas Harbor has been a very common thing I've heard about. And, I know for some people paying those fees, from the, small boat harbors, when they see their fees increase, they would like to see some level of service increase. And so gain an understanding of that context in the decisions that we're making outside of the portion that's maximally offsetting. I guess I'd just like to have some options that might be things that help out docks and harbors as well as just things that help out the rest of CBJ. Does that make sense? Thank you. And then I'll remove my objection.
Ms. Hall.
And mine is an objection for the purpose of a question. To the maker of the motion, you mentioned that this would be for operations for docks and harbors. We would be hanging on to in excess of anything above what they needed. Does that also include their needs for capital needs, or is it just for operations? And in the memo, it points out that this could potentially alleviate the need for sales tax initiatives for funding for docks and harbors.
Ms. Wall.
I think staff might be able to do a better job than I can, but I'll take a crack at, as an enterprise fund, docks and, the docks maintain funding that both takes care of their annual operations and their, capital needs. And so when I say operations, I mean kind of their regular annual budget. And I'll look at staff to make sure I'm using the correct words in describing that.
Director Flick.
Thank you, Assemblymember Wall. Assemblymember Hall, pardon me. The motion would only provide for the $700,000 that docks would have gotten from marine passenger fees that they're now getting from the dockage fees. It does not address putting additional funds into their fund balance for future capital.
Okay, any objection, further objection? We'll let Ms. Hall think about that. And just for everybody's memory, remember it's docks and harbors, so there's two different enterprise funds, two different operating budgets. So I know, Mr. Steininger, you talked about the bathrooms at Mike Pusich Harbor, I want to say, but those would probably come from the harbor side, not the dock side. These are the big docks. So, but anyway, doesn't mean that they can't still put them in there. So, Ms. Hall, I'm looking for you. Are you maintaining your objection?
No, I will remove my objection.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. Does anybody need it reread? Do we have any objection? Okay, we seem to have worked through that. Thank you, Ms. Wall, for that. Go ahead. Do you have another motion?
I have another motion, and this one might be even more vague for the body, but my intent will be to,
Ms. Wall, hold on one second, just to make it quite clear. See, no objection, that motion passes. Make that clear on the record. Ms. Wall, you have something?
Yep. Okay, so my intent by putting this out there is to give us something to start working on. My motion would be to direct staff to bring us back a resolution that would memorialize the process that this process for the future, so that in future years, we also, the intent of the assembly would be that additional funding coming from that revenue comes back for CBJ operational expenses and projects. So that, a resolution really just, is meant to speak to our intent so that we can keep that practice going. And I'll see what questions you have on that.
Do you want that resolution to come back to the finance committee or go to?
Yes, yes, please. Let's bring it back to the finance committee.
Any objection to that? I'm getting a couple thumbs up, and then I'm getting Mr. Kelly. Do you have an objection?
I guess maybe just an add-on to this resolution. Because I do see like the Docks Enterprise as having capital needs, and maybe maybe in a given year there's a project that they want to do. So if we're going to be doing a resolution that kind of memorializes this in perpetuity, I think I would want to include it somewhere in the language of this resolution, some sort of process for working with Docks and Harbors Board to make sure that we're not stepping on anything that they need to get done or any pressing priority. So if we could just include in the resolution some sort of language that we are working with Docks and Harbors on this.
Okay, I'm going to go to the body on that one because I would rather see the resolution before we add the things. Ms. Hughes-Candies. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Perhaps that last comment you said would take care of it, and it could be discussed then, but I would just, in the interest of giving temperature, I would not want that, because I think resolutions work best when they're fairly obvious what the intent is, and every year as part of the budget process, the enterprise will come before the body, and capital projects will be part of that. So I have some faith that the board director and the city manager, as such capital needs arise, that would happen outside of that, because the assembly ultimately, with this way that it's directing the manager now, that is part of that funding, and the assembly would be responsible to break off that funding as they need it. So, but perhaps what Madam Mayor just said solves it all, which is, I would say, let's get the resolution back from staff, and then we could talk about it then.
So I'm looking at Mr. Kelly. Do you want to do that, or do you want to treat this as an amendment to Ms. Wall's motion?
I think just getting it back would be fine. I just kind of meant to offer that as feedback, so be on everybody's radar, but I'll remove my objection.
Okay, and just remember, the docks touch the boat, so they are primed for marine passenger fees. Anyway, so Mrs. Wall, second motion, any objections? Seeing none, you've done well tonight, Ms. Wall, from afar. And that motion passes. Okay, any other comment on this topic before we go to the next one? Okay, next we have FY25 Assembly Grant Update. Is this, nope, it looks like Mr. Barr is clearing his throat. And Mr. Barr, I know you have a bad voice, but slowly and as loud as we can get it from you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my voice is worse than it normally is. With these microphones. So you have in your packet a memo from me this is the first time we've given you a memo like this in the Finance Committee. I believe you asked for it last year during the budget process, where we included this cover memo, which summarizes all the assembly grants that you provided in the FY25 budget process. So you may look at these and think, that's not what I remember, because you're remembering FY26, which we just did this past budget process. And the reason for that is because the FY25 grant reports were due 90 days after the end of the fiscal year. That leads us to being able to provide them to you tonight. So you have, and so you will receive this same report along with all the individual reports from your grantees on the current fiscal year projects this time next year. So you have a table that summarizes the amount of the award, what they actually spent, if there are any funds remaining, the funding sources. Those are going to be general fund or marine passenger fees, and any notes, any staff notes that we had that we thought might be of interest to you. The grantees that are asterisked are your partner grantees. So remember, in your assembly grant process, there's a multi-pronged path where there's a handful of assembly partners that receive a grant, like partner organizations that generally receive operating grants every year. And then there's also community grant requests. And so that's how those are designated and separated. There are occasionally you provide direction to grantees to expect a one-time funding of their request in lieu of an ongoing funding of their request. When you do that, we include in the memorandum of agreement that we provide to the grantee a request for a plan for either the continuation of that program, if it's an operating program in nature, without CBJ support, or detail on how that program will expire, given your direction to provide one-time funding. And there are notes where that is relevant for the grantees for whom in FY25 you designated either, in both cases, it was partial one-time funding. So I'll just note that for you. And, excuse me, I'll just close by saying that there is the bulk of your packet tonight is composed of the reports that the grantees submitted on their own. And as you read those reports, you can keep the first 3 bullet points on that memo in mind. Those are the things that we ask the assembly grantees to report on. We ask them to provide an accounting of how they used the money funded with the CBJ grant, including for the Community Foundation and the JAC, details about re-granting, so who they then granted CBJ funds to. We ask for a report on the programs that they funded and some detail about how the community benefited from the funds that you provided and any other sort of relevant information that they think is useful to provide. And so you can then, as you skim through, I know you already have, you've had this packet for a little bit now, skim through those reports. Just keep in mind that those are the things that we ask for. And again, this is the first time we're doing this, so if you have feedback on what you would like to see next year, when we do this again, all ears for that, as well as questions.
Questions? I will kick us off with a question. And before everybody gets excited, let me say the whole question. Do we have the ability to direct some of these enterprises on how to do their business? And I don't mean to tell, I'm just picking Alaska He's Smart, how to spend their money, because they know much more than we do. But in my case, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but this is relevant. One of our problems that people may or may not know in the public is the reason we can't put porta potties at our homeless encampments is because of the needle problem. No matter how many Sharps containers you put in them, needles go down into the toilet and the pump trucks can't pump the needles out. So for instance, in the 4As, is there some way we can put a little stipulation on the money that they have to do more of an exchange program? If you look at their number, they have 107,000 syringes giving out and they dispose of 23,000. So that gives us about 83,000 needles that were unaccounted for and creates a problem for us.
Thank you for the question, Madam Mayor. When you are when you are making decisions about funding or not funding grants during the budget process, you can also make a decision about what we should or should not include in the terms of the memorandum of agreement that we do with any particular grantee. So that I think that would be the place to accomplish that if you so desire.
Okay, and I'm not doing anything with that tonight. I just wondered if we were able to do. Again, I'm not against the 4As. I actually support them, but and I'm not against nonprofits giving them freedom to use their money as they see fit. But there's certain instances on some of the things some of our grants do that it would be nice to tighten up just a little bit. Any further questions? You guys are a quiet crowd tonight. Seeing none? Mr. Brooks, you almost didn't make it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As far as, there's the Juneau Economic Development Council and then the Juneau Small Business Development Center. How much crossover is there between those and then any of these other, organizations and entities that are doing similar type work that we finance?
Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Assemblymember Brooks. I'm not sure I have an excellent answer to that question. There are a couple of notes in the staff notes about organizations that received both a grant and a re-grant or, CPJ funds through multiple different sources. As far as the specific crossover between JEDC's work and the Small Business Development Center, I'm not intimately familiar with either. I would say that in general, at least my lay understanding is that the Business Development Center spends more time doing direct consulting with people that are looking at starting up businesses and seeking to develop business plans and learning about kind of the basics about how to run a business, whereas JEDC is a little bit more focused on higher level, I guess I would say, economic development. But you could, and I could help you if you and participate with you and engage in conversations with those two entities directly if you wish.
Thank you.
Ms. Hall.
Are you ready for just a comment, just a general comment?
Are there any further questions? Go ahead, Ms. Hall.
I would just say I appreciate this level of detail, and I think this will be really helpful as we do delve into our community grants this coming year, so thank you.
All right, with that, thank you, Mr. Barr. You did a great job. Moving on to our next item. 4th of July fireworks display. Madam Manager, is that you? Take your it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So it may seem like the 4th of July fireworks display is a long ways off, but there is a tremendous amount of planning and preparation that goes into this beautiful display that we get to enjoy every year, and frankly, our community has been enjoying for the past 40 plus years. So I want to just provide a little bit of background and let you know why we're bringing this conundrum to the body today. But for many years, a volunteer group who refers to themselves as the Juneau Fireworks Crew has been putting on this show. You have Sigrid Dahlberg and Ron Flint in the audience, who are two core members of this crew. There are many other faces that help them put on this show. We discovered last year, I don't, discovered is a funny word, but I guess we realized that this is the only organization in our list of assembly grantees that we have this unique relationship with, where we pay the vendors directly and there's no memorandum of agreement indemnifying the city and borough of Juneau. And that raised a real flag because not, it would raise a flag with any of our grantees, right, to not have that check and balance. We brought it to you last year, worked with the crew on different possible solutions for a variety of reasons. You know, we couldn't come to any solution in time for last year's show, so the assembly did pass an ordinance exempting this purchase from our procurement code, because one of the issues is, you know, we're not following our procurement code. One of the issues is the liability, and those are really the two core issues that we're trying to address. Working with the crew, you know, since they have expressed a willingness to form and I would say not a desire, but a willingness to form some type of corporation that would be able to cover all the liability and kind of provide what we want when we ask them to sign an MOA, right? Identifying the city, be in charge of all the procurement, be in charge of storing the fireworks, be in charge of procuring the barge, be in charge of, you know, the millions of details that we can't even understand that go into that show. So it's not their preferred alternative, but they said that they would be willing to do that. And you do have a letter in your packet that talks through that option and what they think that might cost, which is anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000. We have right now the appropriation is $45,000 for the fireworks for the show. I do want to note that the company that the fireworks are purchased from does provide insurance for the day of the show, and there are lots of rigorous safety standards that are required to be able to put on this show, of which I know almost nothing about because, of course, I'm not the expert. These people are the experts in that, but they are required to be certified by the state of Alaska. They are required to, you know, get permits. There are lots of steps that go into putting on a safe show that we can enjoy. So I did have the opportunity to chat a little bit with some of my fellow city managers and a phone a friend to see how other communities manage this fireworks show, because it's something that many Alaskan towns enjoy. In Whittier, they hire a contractor to put on the show, and that is funded by the city and the chamber and local donations. So again, that is a contractor relationship. In Homer, it's a volunteer group that puts on the show and funds the show. The city just permits it with a special event permit that makes sure, you know, the fire department's involved and all those things. In Seward, it's very similar. The chamber puts on the show. Again, the city's only involvement is that event permit. But Kodiak is an interesting community where they actually put on their own fireworks show. So the city of Kodiak puts on their own fireworks show. And it's a very short 7-minute show on New Year's Eve. And they do this in a way that I think could be a model for us going forward if the assembly chose to kind of that option. The city itself procures the fireworks, stores the fireworks, transports the fireworks, does all the permitting for the show. They don't put on the show because, of course, the city employees are not licensed to be able to do that. Again, it's a very rigorous licensing process. You have to have lots of hours of service and all of that. They bring in someone to do that on a volunteer basis. They do have city employees that are becoming certified with the fire department, and it's really a collaboration with the fire department, the manager's office, and then bringing in someone who has that certification in the hopes that, you know, over time their employees can get certified. So when I go to the options listed in your memo, I want to talk about them in the context of what we're trying to care for, right? We're trying to care for being able to enjoy this show that is put on every year, that lifts our spirits, that is a tradition, that has a lot of historical significance, that's listed in almost every real estate listing for Douglas Island home. So again, this is a very important part of our culture, and care for the liability. And again, why you are involved is because eventually there'll be a risk assessment that, you know, I'm deferring to you as how much risk that you're willing to take on to be able to continue to provide that. So the first option on page 192 of your packet is to increase the annual budget for fireworks and issue an RFP. Again, this is an option. This is not an option that the crew is, preferred alternative, but it's something that they would be willing to do if they were asked to absorb all of that risk and liability. I do want to say, we could work with like a volunteer organization, kind of like the chamber or other organizations that communities do that in. And there's various reasons why that is not an ideal scenario, or we haven't been able to like land on that ideal kind of nonprofit scenario for this, but that could be another option. So that's kind of option one, is the like hand everything off to an organization. They identify the city, we wipe our hands of it and just all get to enjoy that show. Challenges with that option, benefits too. Then of course there's the option to not fund the fireworks show and just say, hey, it's the risk exposure is too great. I do want to acknowledge that if we did something like that, I'm sure there are expenditures that we would still need to fund in the kind of closing up. I mean, the crew has been putting on this show for years. I can't imagine there aren't lots of loose ends that would need to be tied up, so we would need to care for that. And then the third option is maintaining the status quo, and I think that this is probably the most palpable option. And so trying to get us somewhere where we can like maintain the status quo but care a little bit better for risk, I think that looks a little bit more like the Kodiak model, where we, the city, has a much greater role in the procurement, permitting, transportation, storage, and oversight. Again, not because we are experts, not because we know any of this, but because if we can manage that risk, right? It's all about managing our risk. So we'll have the risk. It's risky. Life's risky. But if we can manage that, then if we were to have a claim at any time, we could tell our insurer, we did all of these things to manage the risk. We followed all the appropriate protocol. So I think what that would look like is dedicating staff in one of our departments, maybe the fire department, to be that point person, to have that relationship with the volunteers, to make sure there's chain of custody, to make, they'd probably have to teach us all the things that they have to do that we would have to check off. And I think there'd be an increased expenditure in that option, just because we would need to be procuring the storage of the fireworks in a real, in a reliable way that we found, safe and all these things that really have been managed by these volunteers. So that is my kind of discussion on the three options that are presented in the memo. And I am happy to answer questions to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Madam Manager. We'll do questions first. Mr. Kelly, and then Ms. Atkinson, and Mr. Steininger. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Madam Manager. You mentioned that there is some insurance policy for the day of the event. I guess this might be either for you or for Ms. Flick. How much does that insurance protect us from liability? Is there any maximum that we could be liable for depending on what happens the day of the event?
Madam Manager, you can take this.
I do not know what the minimum and maximums on that are. I know that the day of the event is not the kind of greatest concern that we have from a liability perspective. It's all the work that leads up to that.
Okay, then we have Mr. Steininger and then Ms. Wall.
So, Manager Kester, it sounds like you found one community or at least one community that currently contracts it out, similar to what option A would be. Is that $350,000, $250,000, $350,000 price range comparable to what they're paying to contract it out?
I
Madam
do
Manager.
not know how much they are paying. I do believe I asked that question. It's probably, it's a city of Whittier, a much smaller community, probably a smaller show. So I will follow up with that information once I get it.
Kind of a follow-up.
Sure.
Do we have more information breaking down how the Juneau fireworks crew got to that $250,000 to $350,000 number? Like, because, it sounds like, based on your statements, a lot of the, the liability around the day of show is already covered by the fireworks manufacturer, and all the licensing and all of that's taken care of. Like, what explains that $300,000 difference?
So I can't answer that detail except to know that there are things that have to be cared for, like the barge, transportation, storage, that all have a cost. We did issue an RFI, a request for information, to try to get some of that detail. Understandably, that, producing that type of cost estimate would take a tremendous amount of work from this group of volunteers who, really just want to be able to put on a show, not have to justify their expenditures. I mean, they've been donating volunteer labor, right? So that's also a huge part of it. Is there's many people over many months that go into putting on this show. I'm sure we could get more information. I also am sure that if the assembly appropriated a number, they would then put pen to paper and do that exercise to provide something that was more nuanced than this kind of back of the napkin number that we've been given.
All right, Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Mr. Kelly asked my question, but I'm gonna try to maybe state it somewhat differently to make sure, to me, the liability cost and the risk assessment of, the city being liable or not really comes down to, how much you think we're liable for. Obviously, everything's, we've had safe operations for a long time, but this is, things can happen. And I remember last year we were talking about like a cap, that we had a cap on what it might cost, around $350,000. Is that still kind of a good ballpark estimate for what we could potentially be liable for if something was to go wrong? Or is that an area that we need more information on still?
Madam Manager.
So the $350,000 number is based on our deductible. And I think that in order for our insurance to cover any incident, we would need to be able to show that that all of the safety precautions were taken, that we were doing everything correctly. And so we weren't able to get in touch with our insurer due to the holidays, but we would have a concern that without a higher level of CBJ engagement, that coverage could be questioned. And I did want to follow up that Deputy Manager Barr was able to find the policy, and it's $1 million per incident at $2 million total, and those are 2023 numbers.
Okay, okay, Ms. Hughes Candies, I was gonna do a question, but I'll go to you first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just am making sure I'm thinking through the option 3 correctly. So that's one of the pros is it enables the volunteers to stay volunteers. That's their preferred, what they'd like to do versus making a corporation. Do we feel like from the CBJ side, it sounds like we were going to have more of involvement in any case based on, or maybe I'm misunderstanding in the letter, the request for storage space. Do we feel like we know where we could store some fireworks? Fire department sounds likely, but do you feel like in your capacity that you could see like, yeah, there's a way for CBJ to get there to have that involvement to manage that risk? Does it seem palatable, or maybe not palatable, but doable?
Madam Manager, sorry.
Thank you. I do think that There are mechanisms to, find CBJ property that I think has to be 100 feet away from a road and, adequately adequately locked, checked on, those types of things. So I do think that that is doable. I do think that providing, it's not even, I hate to use the word oversight because it's like nobody at CBJ knows what all the work that the crew goes through and all the safety standards. It's more like our bureaucracy, like we need to put it through our bureaucracy. I do think both of those things will have a cost associated with them. I certainly don't think it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I would bring back some increase in the 2027 budget, once we figure out how to solve those. I do think that there is still a level of risk. This is just my proposal to manage that risk more actively.
Thank you, that's a helpful characterization.
Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the current budget for the fireworks show is at 45,000. Is that like historically how much has been spent on it?
Madam Manager.
Thank you. There's minimal increases annually, or not every year, but minimal increases to adjust for inflation, but it hasn't increased significantly.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
So essentially, the other two option, the increase in the budget, is that so we could procure all the things to maintain the operation, and own them and permanently maintain them, or is it on an annual basis, just kind of like leasing or renting?
Madam Manager.
So just so I can hopefully answer your question. Option one, and that specific ask is we don't do anything. We wash our hands entirely of it. An independent organization does that. And again, that is very much a guesstimate. Option three, when I say maintaining the status quo plus some, would be we would be purchasing, maintaining, owning, and providing oversight for the chain of custody and other things that would need to be. And I don't have a cost estimate for that. I just want to acknowledge that if we choose a managed risk version of option three, so option 3 plus, that would expect me to come back with greater than $45,000 in the budget.
Follow up.
No, you have to wait your turn because there's other people. Mr. Steininger and then Ms. Helm.
And this, maybe it's unfair to ask you a question about letter written by the Juneau fireworks crew, but if I'm reading this correctly, is it a correct understanding that, absent the discovery that we weren't following process, if we were just blindly going forward with the status quo, we'd still be running into significant issues and putting on the fireworks show because of the loss of the barge and storage already. So really the indemnity issue is just kind of a small, our procurement process and indemnification issue is just a small piece of the larger problem confronting the fireworks show this year. Is that an accurate interpretation of this kind of long bullet point list?
That is certainly how I read that letter, and in conversations that regardless of where we end up, those issues need to be cared for. And to be fair, the crew has brought those issues to me since I became city manager. Hey, we're gonna need storage. Storage is a major issue for us. So it's kind of brought these things to the head. I don't know that the storage is the biggest issue. I feel like the liability is still a bigger issue as far as kind of where we're stuck.
Okay, as long as you keep it to the question.
Yeah, and so in solving those other issues, when I read this memo, it sounds like a lot of the $250,000 to $350,000 cost estimate is based on the idea of not being able to seek volunteer donated services to solve those storage and barge issues. Is anything about our adherence to the city procurement process or adherence to the grants process in this situation set up in a way that would bar JFC from going and continuing to seek donated services, donated storage, donated barge time, you know, those things, the way that they've ran this show for decades? You know, would we be barring them from doing that? I mean, it's my understanding that we have other grants that we give out to entities that then go and get volunteer labor, volunteer services to accomplish their goals.
Madam Manager.
The difference is those other agencies sign an MOA indemnifying the city and borough of Juneau, and then we could care, we don't care how they procure those services. I imagine we would have, I don't know what those particulars would be, but I definitely could foresee a situation where it would be more difficult when the city is kind of in charge versus a volunteer organization. I imagine a situation where it would be more difficult to gather donations. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't ways around that and you know, creative things that can be done. But you know, generally when we're involved, things are more complicated, more expensive.
Ms. Hall, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. My question was very similar to Neil's, so that was
Mr.
answered.
Steineger's, I don't know
Mr.
why we're going to
Steineger,
first names
sorry.
this tonight, but we'll stop that. Okay, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I was looking at the price tag and it does appear small, you know, 45,000 for the status quo. But I also think about that in terms of the budget reductions that we're facing, and that for some job classes that could maybe be half a year's salary and benefits. And so you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned that the city of Seward, for example, works with their chamber. And you mentioned that if we were to do something similar, I think you might foresee some difficulties with that. Would you be able to elaborate on those difficulties? Or thank you.
Madam Manager.
Thank you. So just to clarify, I do think that if we were to grant the funds to an organization like the chamber, we would do this. We would wash our hands of it. We'd be like, chamber, you figure it out. And then all of those difficulties of procuring a barge and storage and all of that would be on the chamber. So, or nonprofit. And I think the challenge is that, you know, finding someone who's willing to take on all of that, right? And that challenge is very real. And so I just want to clarify that I do think that a nonprofit or or formal organization, be it a business or a for-profit business or a nonprofit business, we could enter into an MOA with and say we're not responsible at all. Now, is that a practical solution? I have been informed by the people who have been doing this for 40 years that that is not a practical solution, but certainly it meets my requirements of washing, you know, our hands of that liability and all of those kind of concerns.
Okay, I'll go to Ms. Wall and then I'll ask my question. Go ahead, Ms. Wall.
Thanks. This is kind of just a follow-up on that conversation, that because when I remember us having this conversation a year ago, that was, I believe, the way we were going was, let's find a nonprofit that can, you know, own this, whether that's started by the volunteers or one that we have in the community. I believe we did get somewhere with that conversation. I mean, is the reason that that's not a solution here because you're still concerned about the risk, or just because it wasn't, parties didn't want to do that? Does that make sense?
Hopefully, Madam Manager can make sense of it.
Yeah, thank you, Assemblymember Wall. So we did work with the 4th of July committee on, you know, asking them if they would be willing to host this activity. And they did indicate that, you know, they would be willing to work on that. But there are other challenges that I think the crew had with kind of being absorbed by an entity like that. And this is where probably I've spoken on behalf of them far too much. So I can't go into a lot of detail on what those are, but I can imagine, you know, their preference is to continue working in a close relationship with CBJ and not as a separate entity.
Perfect segue into my question. So my question is regardless of what, well, if we pick number one, they have to form a business, but, and I'm assuming we're not picking number two. So number three would be eventually they need to either form a nonprofit, align themselves with a nonprofit or other business, or we haven't talked about it yet, but there's a potential that they become CBJ employees for a week or whatever it is. Is that an option too?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that that is really the version of my maintaining the status quo plus, which is CBJ actively managing that risk. Now, I don't know that we need to like pay them. We could pay them if that was something that was necessary for the volunteers to feel like they were adequately protected. But that is kind of the nature of the more actively managed risk, right? That we would take and assign, you know, staff in a department to be a contact to make sure, you know, all the things were done adequately and possibly enter into some, you know, definitely enter into some official relationship with individuals, if not an organization.
And my follow-up to that one would be, but at this moment, we don't have time to pursue those avenues because it sounds like we need to get busy on the fireworks.
Thank you.
According to, I don't remember his name, his letter, that time is of essence.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. I think you do bring up a good point. I think it would be difficult to even, I think we can move in the direction of option 3+, certainly this year, but there would definitely be things that would be difficult to implement in time for this show. And we would be requesting something similar to last year where there was an ordinance to exempt that from procurement code. So I think if you were to give me direction to implement something like option 3+, we would get as close as we could, but give the crew the latitude to continue doing business, not knowing all the things that they have already in place or need to have in place before we can work out those details.
Thank you for that. Seeing no questions, Ms. Wall, you want to try another motion? Since you did well the first time, even though I had to write it down. I'll write this one down too.
Can I just say 3+? No, I'll do my best to capture what I believe is 3+ here, maybe with my own spin. So I move that the assembly direct staff to for this year maintain the status quo, which would include an increase in the budget in FY27 and an ordinance continuing to exempt the purchase of fireworks from purchasing code. But in the meantime, move forward on options to take care of indemnification. I think from my perspective, whether that means the city playing a much more active role in making sure we're taking care of our risk, you know, or a separate, and, you know, if there's a nonprofit that is, you know, a better option for the volunteers. I'm fine letting staff and the crew work out what that option is, but something different than what we have right now. It's my motion.
Thank you for that motion. Do you have a dollar sign for that motion, or do you want to leave that open?
I'm leaving that open.
All right, we have heard the motion. Anybody need to hear the motion again? Everybody understand what she's saying? The 3+ option, I guess. Thanks for coining that phrase, Madam Manager. Mr. Brooks, you have an objection?
an objection for an amendment?
Certainly.
Uh, I'm thinking adding that dollar amount to it would be useful, because if we go beyond 350,000, then we're outside of the realm of what a private business can do, and then we wouldn't be as efficient.
So state your amendment a little more clearer, please.
I would like to add an amendment that we direct staff to proceed with option 3, but looking at those additional supports, storage, and equipment procedure up to the amount of $350,000.
Any objection to this motion? Mr. Steininger?
I'll object, not because I think we should spend more than $350,000, just to be very clear, but I think leaving the number off, I would like to see this as close to $45,000 as it possibly can be, I guess, is where I'm getting at. I think although I don't want to go above 350, obviously, I think putting that number in there gives a lot more leeway for just solving problems with money instead of going out and seeking donations of time and labor and barges and so on and so forth.
Okay, Ms. Hughes Candies, and then Ms. Atkinson, did you also want to? I couldn't tell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just alerting you to Ms. Wall.
Oh, thank you.
But since my mic is off, I'll say, I think I appreciate where Mr. Brooks is coming from, and I agree with what Mr. Steinecker is coming from. And I'm looking across the room. I think I would feel more comfortable just with no number, but I don't think staff or the volunteers needs
Sidebars?
a number I think people are going to try to do it the way that they've done it, which is cheaper. I think people are going to try to do it cheaply because they want to keep doing what they've been doing, so.
All right, Ms. Wall?
Yeah, I think I'm with everybody here that my intent behind not putting a number here is that this will come back to us in the budget, and I would expect it to be very close to $45,000 as we can get. I would say no to anything close to $300,000 that's obtainable. So I appreciate Mr. Brooks' intent, but I do think that if we put that number in there, all of a sudden that will become the budget, and that's not what any of us want.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Anybody else want to speak against or for the motion? I'll object also for the reasons that have already been stated. I think $350,000, although you said up to, so I appreciate that. And I understand where you're coming from, but that is way higher than I would look at. So with that, we have an amendment on the table, an objection. Mr. Brooks,
I'll remove my objection. I
your
see,
amendment?
I'll remove my amendment. I see that, it's stating that it would increase the cost in fiscal year 27, but it's saying still far less than what the company would require. So, and to miss what Assemblymember Wall was saying too, I'm sure we'll have further discussions once it gets to actual numbers. So I'll remove my amendment.
All right.
Objection.
Okay, thank you for that. So we'll back to Ms. Wall's motion. Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. Let's take a 10-minute break. We will bring us back to order. I think we have everybody here, and I was remiss not saying thank you for many, many years of service to the Juneau Fireworks crew. It's been a volunteer organization for a long time, and we appreciate all the work they've done, and all of us have enjoyed the show every year, so without fail, rain or shine. So probably done in the snow even. With that, we go to our next item, legislative capital priorities. Who is taking that one? All fingers are getting pointed at you, Madam Manager.
Yes, that is me, although we do have Director Koch online if there are questions. You have the list, the aggregated list of legislative capital priorities in your packet. The full booklet, which has a project detail for each project, was in previous packets and distributed to you electronically to do your ranking. This process of legislative capital priorities really started just about 5 years ago when you hired a new engineering and public works director who wanted a way to try to put some of our more aspirational projects on a list, because we get a lot of criticism that the CIP is like nuts and bolts and just taking care of stuff, but we need a place to put like bigger projects or things that are a little bit, more visionary, and that we are likely to ask for federal, state funding or apply for grants for. And so this list goes through a pretty extensive public process and is reviewed by all the boards and commissions, or the opportunity to review it by all the boards and commissions. The Planning Commission has a special review of it. SRC reviews it. They are asked to comment on or contribute no more than 2 priorities. So you will see some projects on here that are definitely not from staff, definitely not projects. I mean, I'll just use Eagle Crest Housing as one that, came from the Eagle Crest Board, has been prioritized by the Eagle Crest Board, and that's why it's in your packet. So what we are asking for you today is to amend this list and forward it to the full body for adoption. Then we will discuss it with our legislative delegation at our legislative breakfast, submit a booklet to both our state and our local delegation. I just want to emphasize that the list is presented in your packet. It's just math. It's an amalgamation of rankings, just to give you a starting point. This is your list. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. I think Director Koch asked for some clarification between 15 and 16, just because those were 2 ties. Without any clarification, we would just leave it as stated in the booklet. Those are pretty low projects. I will say we just spend most of our energy on the top 10 as far as projects that we actually make progress on. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't make progress or apply for a grant or welcome funding from something lower down the list. It just means that that's kind of how things shake out since we've been working through this process. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and like I mentioned, we can always punt to Director Koch if you have real project-specific questions that I'm not able to answer.
Thank you that, Madam Manager. With the body's motion, I would rather not fight about 18 and 17 and those kind of things, and I really don't care about 15 or 16 because we're going to stay with the top ones. The other ones will stay on the list just in case there's some weird little grant somewhere. For instance, let's just say there's some federal grant for off-road vehicles, so it would be there and it might potentially get a grant, but we, like the manager said, we typically stay to the top 10. We certainly could go to 11 or 12 or even move it up to 8 for all that. So that's more of the discussion we want. We certainly don't want to care about whether some of these things are even on the list. We don't want to waste our time with that. So is everybody happy with this list, or does someone want to make an argument to move something forward or down with the criteria I said before? Mr. Steininger.
Yeah, so I'll take a crack at breaking the 15-16 tie here, but maybe throw a wrench in the gears a little bit as well. I move that the Fish Creek Road Resurface and Reconstruction Project be moved up to become number 11 and shift 11 through 14 down by 1 and renumber accordingly, and I can speak to my rationale.
Before you speak to, is there objection? Okay, so there's objective. Speak to your motion and then we'll hear from the objectors.
Well, aside from just, trying to break the 15-16 tie, my logic here on Fish Creek Road resurface and reconstruction specifically is this is a project that kind of needs to get done in a fairly near time period. because we have a pretty big, another big project that relies on that road being more passable than it is now. Like, we are planning to have, or potentially planning, if we go forward with the gondola project, 70,000 more visitors coming up via buses over Fish Creek Road. There's a lot of just general traffic safety concerns on North Douglas Highway, but there's very specifically Fish Creek Road as a problem. And I think we need to be trying to push a little bit harder now to get the state to reconstruct that road so that it is a safe, passable road for that additional amount of traffic. And, to the comments of we only really try that hard down to about 10, or maybe we can get to 11. I think putting it up in that spinning range of trying might be a good move.
Thank you, Mr. Steininger. Who objects? Ms. Huskanis and Ms. Atkinson, and then Ms. Wall.
Thanks, Madam Manager. I'll keep my comments to just this move, but I'll foreshadow that I have a move of my own that I'll try to make. In terms of the way I approach this, breaking a 15-16 tie, I was just going to say you're 15 and you're 16. I appreciate from your arguments why you think this needs to be higher up in the priorities. I'll keep the meat of my argument, I guess, to Saturday at the retreat, because I think it's more helpful there, but I have concerns about moving forward with the large capital project that you mentioned, and that is kind of, if you're going to do it, then this becomes really more important, and if you're not going to do it, then this is maybe not as high in the priorities. And so for me, I don't feel surety like, yeah, that's going forward, and as a piece of that, we need to do this road. So seeing where it fell in the rankings, and I would just say, you could make that 15 and make the other one 16. So I object.
Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I pretty much agree exactly with Ms. Hughes-Scandies. I also just think it's a bit of a shakeup of what I think how most of us rank these projects, and I'll caveat all this with we're probably fighting for a ranking for state capital funds that just won't exist this year, so maybe this is all a moot point, but I just don't feel comfortable with that shift at this point.
Ms. Wall.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
All right. So we have a motion and objection. Madam Clerk, will you call roll? Wait, Mr. Steininger.
Kind of seeing the writing on the walls. I'll amend my motion to just make it 15 and 16 then.
Any objection to moving it to 15 instead of 16? That motion passes. So there, Ms. Koches will be happy. Okay. Ms. Hughes-Scandies, you mentioned that you might want to make a little move on your own.
Thank you, Madam
Hughes-Scandies dance.
Mayor, and thank you, Manager Custer, for queuing us up to start tearing into this list. I am looking at last year's scorings and this year's scorings and thinking about, I tried to keep my own thinking to which projects are top 10, so it's gratifying to hear staff characterize it that way. And I also spend time thinking when I'm doing my rankings, which items are top 3, and I think we have some issues that make those no-brainers. Telephone Hill in our mathed out ranking landed in spot 11. The year prior it had been spot 4. It certainly has been a topic of much discussion and community engagement. The Assembly and staff have put time and energy into that work. We have put dollars into that work. We have allocated money. I don't want to mix up the whole list too terribly. So my move would be to move Telephone Hill redevelopment up to where Statter Harbor Wave Attenuator is, and then just bump those two, Statter Harbor and Shore Power, down. And that would keep everybody else in that same order. And I guess I would just say, for reasoning behind that, if Telephone Hill redevelopment, based on all the work that the assembly has done and the staff has done, if we're truly going this course, which I think we've, gotten a lot of community feedback and we've said we're going to keep going this course, then it makes sense to me that this would be in the top 10. And I agree, we're unlikely to get money. But I think that's important to me to see some consistency through our priorities and what we're working on. And then for my own personal spin on it, I'm always going to be moving to put housing higher up in our priorities because I think that is a linchpin to so many of Juneau's issues. So I'll stop there.
You've heard the motion. Is there any objection? Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. I appreciate Ms. Candy's comments about continuity, but I also, I think I did the rankings the way I did, with very, very specific and almost mathematical reasoning. But the reason why Telephone Hill, I guess the reason why Standard Harbor might have ranked higher for me was because for me that's more of a safety issue, and I prioritize safety above all other issues. So I think I would object to that placement.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. I'll object just so I can, oh, sorry, Ms. Wall, go ahead.
I'll speak in favor of this motion. I know, these lists, everyone's got their different rationales for how they rank them, and sometimes they come out weird. And to me, this one comes out very weird, as a result of multiple people kind of prioritizing things differently. And I'm interested in hearing how people are thinking about it when they put it down here so low. But to me, number one priority is always housing. We know that this project, to be successful, to reach the vision that we have been working through for years and that we all talked about when we move forward with this, it is going to cost money, and we may not have that money. And so we are going to have to be looking for that money to make sure these are affordable units that get built there. And so, if this isn't, I would put this much higher. I did put this much higher on my list, but I'll take what Ms. Hughes-Sandys is doing, because to me, if we're talking to our delegation in a few weeks and they see Telephone Hill down here at 11, they're going to wonder whether this is something we're committed to, and I'm committed to it. I think this body is, and so to me, a higher placement shows that we're moving forward on making this a project that meets the objectives that we have been working towards. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Mr. Brooks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would kind of tail on what Assemblymember Kelly was saying there. Definitely safety comes first, but then also with what we're facing currently, cost-saving measures as well are a thing to be putting in the preference. For the housing, I'd like to see Peterson Hill and Telephone Hill closer together, maybe moving Peterson Hill down closer to Telephone Hill, but looking at them kind of in a pure view of now that we're facing legal challenges with one of the developments, reassessing issues for the incremental infill or ways that can address both of those housing projects with slightly alternative options, but still leave it available for types of state funding and other things.
Is that an objection, Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Thank you for that. Ms. Hall?
I'm going to speak in support of the motion. I also had Telephone Hill ranked quite a bit higher. I had it as my number 6. So for all the reasons that were stated, I support focusing on housing and prioritizing this. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll object, and I'll speak to my objection. I rank Telephone Hill lower Not because I'm not 100% committed to the project, but we have spent some money on it, and I have said from the beginning, once we do some money, I would like to see us get away from it and get it out to private development. And I also was being realistic, and I figured we'll be lucky to get money for the first three. But with that said, I understand where Ms. Hughes-Candies is coming from, so I will remove my objection. Mr. Steininger.
I'm going to object and vote against this motion, but I want to make it clear, it's not because I don't think that Telephone Hill redevelopment is a high priority for us as a body. You know, we have committed quite a bit to it, mostly just time in addition to money, and I want to see that project completed and successful. But when I think about what this list is used for, I think it's kind of meaningless to bring Telephone Hill above number 10, but have Peterson Hill up at 5, because if we're looking for a pot of money for housing, they're going to stop at 5, and they're not going to move past Peterson Hill. If there's a pot of money for housing, they'll look at our highest ranked housing project. So I think it's kind of meaningless to put it above there, and there might be projects that could be in the top 10 that maybe they're not housing projects, which is a very high priority for us, but being in the top 10 might give them a little bit more credence for a specific pot of money when somebody's looking at this.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. Any more? Ms. Hughes-Candies, would you repeat your motion one more time, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I moved to reorder the list by moving Telephone Hill, which is currently ranked 11, into Statter Harbor Wave Attenuator spot, which is ranked 9.
All right, you've heard them. Well, go, you want to?
Oh, I'll just say, and to me, when I did that, I was kind of looking for a compromise spot in recognition that others must have ranked it lower, which is why I decided to settle for top 10 instead of a higher number for myself. I ranked it number 4, which is what it was last year, so.
All right, thank you for that. We have a motion with objection. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. On the motion to reorder Telephone Hill redevelopment up to number 9 and shift the Statter Harbor Wave Attenuator and Shore Power projects down. Assemblymember Hughes-Candies.
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly.
No.
Assemblymember Steininger.
No.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Brooks.
No.
Assemblymember Hall.
No.
Assemblymember Wall.
Yes.
Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Motion fails, 4 ayes, 4 nays.
Anybody else want to go for their project? Try to move it up a little or down a little.
Madam Mayor, can I make a comment?
Not quite.
Which
yet.
is what,
I'm trying to think if I want to do a motion yet.
okay. It could inspire the minds of motions, but I'll wait.
Okay, I will make a motion. So, Mr. Kelly, I'm going to hand you the gavel for 2 seconds.
Madam Mayor,
In light of what Ms. Hughes-Candy said, and we usually do just sit with the top 10, and I don't want people to get the wrong idea about Telephone Hill, I would move Telephone Hill to number 10 and keep it on the top 10 and ask for unanimous consent.
any objections? Mr. Brooks?
I would like to object just because the long-term implication of the shore power has a more broad support and more tangible savings in the future.
Any further objection? All right, we're ready for a roll call.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. On the motion to move Telephone Hill redevelopment to number 10 on the list, Mayor Weldon,
Yes.
Assemblymember Brooks,
No.
Assemblymember Hughes Scandies,
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson,
Yes.
Assemblymember Hall. Hall. Assemblymember Steininger,
No.
Assemblymember Wall,
Yes.
Chair Kelly.
No.
Motion passes. Motion passes 5 ayes, 3 nays.
All right. Everybody good? Going once, going twice? You still want to make your comment, Ms. Hughes Candies? Mr. Brooks, do you want to try and do something before she makes her comment? Go ahead.
I would move that we move number 20 up to number 19.
I'm going to look at the body for that because I asked at the beginning that we stayed away from these minor things. Yeah, no, we're going to look at pretty much the top 10. It might dip down 11, 12, but is the body willing to entertain motions that far down? I guess I'm seeing some no's, so prefer not
I
to.
remove my motion.
Because we could argue about those all day, because some of us didn't even want some of the bottom ones on the list. Okay. Anything further? Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thanks for indulging me. I do think it's good sometimes when we have something like this and the meeting's moving along okay, it's good for us to look at the different actions we're doing, the different lists we have, and are there random inconsistencies or not. I just wanted to point to shore power at Doc 16B. I think major, if we could magic wand that, we're all supportive. We all know what the benefits would be. Actually, you know what? I'll wait until after we do the bid if. But there are things that sometimes simultaneously we're saying this is not really realistic anymore. Or, when we do a conditional use permit, we take that condition away for the dock. So I just think it's important for these all feel like, letters to Santa that are never going to get any money, but just to be looking at it for that consistency if it matches what we're doing with our other actions. That's my only comment.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. And remember, shore power is a little bit different animal, so if there is some weird grant, that might be one place that because that's how we picked up grants for shore power already, is they do go past 10 because they have a special energy grant that gets down there. So even though we try to stay at the top 10, our delegation is very aware on both the state and the feds, although as Ms. Atkinson said, there's not much free state money, but they're very aware that that's still one of our priorities. So with that, do you need any more direction on this, Madam Manager?
I'd love a motion to move it to the Assembly for adoption.
You would love one. Ms. Hughes Candies, would you be so kind?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the reordered list be moved to the Assembly for introduction and ask unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, so moved. Okay, with that, we're going to jump over retreat preview because I want to keep that as close as we can to our final chat and go to the Visitor Industry Task Force. So we do have our tourism director of tourism, sorry, forget your title. She's a director, all I know is that, in the room for questions, but this is taking a while to make. We had hoped to get it out, but we've been very cautious with this and trying to dot all the i's and cross our t's and make sure it's something that will help us moving forward. Since we do have some newer members, the task force is made when we want to spend lots of time on a particular subject, get a lot of public input, but we necessarily don't have the time as a body to do work on that. With that being said, when their work is done, it comes back to the Assembly, similar to the other ones, and then we can weigh in on that. And I will acknowledge the last time we did the Visitor Industry Task Force, we had this pesky little thing called the COVID. And so it came back at a bad time, but we have one already we're going to be looking at, and that is the short-term rental task force had recommendations, and we're going to see it in lands pretty soon, I imagine. So with that being said, and we just didn't make this out of the air, well, let's have a visitor industry task force because we haven't done one for a while. There is some issues that need to be addressed, and our tourism director relies heavily on these recommendations on how to move forward with her job. So that's one of the reasons we're doing this. So with that being said, we'll go through this. We do have a typo in the first part. It's Matt Catterson, not Patterson. I have tried very hard in coming up with people. I would say this community is no longer deadly against, as a community as a whole, deadly against tourism, nor are we a community that's opening our gates wide for tourism. I would say most of our residents fall in the understand tourism is really good for our economy, but at the same time cautious on growth. And so on that realm of cautiousness is how I picked assembly or people to be on this committee. So with that, I won't go through which everybody is supposed to be in case something happens, but our proposed member of the public are Kirby Day, Kirsha Hughes Scandies, Sarah Lowell, Matt Catterson, Milani Shivens, Adrian or Ren Scott. Shem Suter will be our Docks and Harbors liaison. We missed that last time, which was an error, so we put someone there. And Jeremy Timothy is our tribal member that the tribe has come up with, although I've talked. Ms. Atkinson has agreed to chair this committee, and Neil Steininger has agreed to also be on the committee. So with that, you can see that they have 5 charges. A couple of people have helped me with this off the assembly. And so one would be revisit and update 2020 VIT recommendations. So there is some recommendations that we have worked on, completed, done a good job. There's some that need to be either removed, tweaked, or looked at differently. And then we're going to identify opportunities for managing impacts, including infrastructure projects and policy directions. A lot of concerns we have that you may or may not be aware of is there's quite a bit of congestion in Auk Bay. Flight scene, we'll still look at that, which is one of the reasons that we put one of the people on the assembly is they work for a helicopter company. It would be good to have them. And whale watching is also an area that actually the whale watchers are trying to regulate, and we can help them by looking at a little further and hopefully help them with that direction. Develop a structure for a revolving loan program, and this is, thank you for Mr. Steininger for this sentence, to encourage investment in projects including clean energy, emission reduction, and other impact and mitigation capital investments. And number 4 is within a larger regional strategy discussion, develop a broad 10-year tourism direction for Juneau. Some people think 10 years is too long, but it's just looking out. The focus shouldn't be on the years so much as trying to keep us in mind that we are part of the region and what we do affects others, not even just birthing, but also Juneau is seen as a leader in the tourism industry. So people pay attention to what we do, and then they sometimes do similar, or sometimes we are lessons that learn that you don't do. Hence lawsuits with the cruise lines. And then we also, since we're looking at little revenue opportunities, identify visitor industry revenue opportunities that we might not be thinking about. So I'll entertain questions, and like I said, we have Ms. Pierce in the audience if anybody has questions. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for all the work that you and others put into thinking about this. Lots of these things seem like good things to get guidance from this group on. The one that caught my eye, but it's a long list, and the one that caught my eye as kind of I questioned is the last one about visitor industry revenue opportunities, only because I feel like we just spent a lot of time kind of on this topic. We did decide to raise dockage fees. We've been looking at kind of lost revenue, do we expect, and I just wouldn't want this group spending a bunch of time on something that there's not a lot to uncover if we already kind of went through it, but maybe you or Miss Pierce can talk to me about the types of things that this group might look at that we haven't considered or that we'd want more guidance from others on.
I'll start, and then Ms. Pierce thinks I need help, she can run down. So this isn't looking at the revenue options the same way we're looking at. This is actually going to compare our fees and charges against other communities and look at the global market. For instance, do we have the same fees as the Caribbean, which should be a little probably more expensive than us, or we have the same fees as Europe? Those are what more we're looking at, but Ms. Pierce walked up, so she thinks she needs to add to this conversation. Go ahead, Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through the chair, we are working as part of the Port Communities of Alaska group to commission a rate study that compares Alaska ports to elsewhere in the world. For exactly the reasons that the mayor described. Where do we stack up compared to other regions? And so I think that work can be an input to this process. I don't think that this is, it was not in the original charge. It was added rather late, but I don't think that this is an extraordinarily burdensome exercise. We just did a commercial use study. As Assemblymember Wool pointed out, we just raised our dockage fees. We've been looking at these types of things, but I think just looking at not only our rates compared to the rest of the world, but kind of what we charge in a holistic way, staff going through the exercise of gathering that information, it hopefully will provide the Assembly with a little bit more surety that the body has a clear idea of the full revenue picture for tourism, and how those fees are used within CBJ. Yes.
And just to further that, Ms. Wall, I'm not looking from this group to say raise or lower your fees. I'm looking at them to say, here's what the rest of the world is doing to give us the ability to think whether we need to raise or lower. And I did want to touch on one thing that Mr. Kelly brought up, and that is legislative, to legislate our, like our 5 MOAs, like our 5 ships a day. I thought that still should be at the body and not at this group, because that is a definitely policy decision. So we didn't put that in here, whether we're going to legislate our MOAs or MOUs. So any further questions? Seeing none, I need a motion. Ms. Hughes-Gandes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And what kind of motion are we looking for? I move that we accept this charge and the proposed members of Visitor Industry Task Force 2.0 and direct staff to begin reaching out to committee members and schedule a meeting.
Thank you for that. And that's, I think, all we need, correct, Madam Manager? Okay, so you heard the motion. Any objection? Seeing none, that motion passes. All right. Do you want to take a break before we go to retreat review, or nope, we're moving on? Ms. Atkinson says we're moving on.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Who is taking this one?
I'll give it a stab, Madam Mayor, and phone a friend as I need it, because Director Flick has been intimately involved in preparing for your retreat. I think that we're going to have a fun-filled day of talking about budget. This will be a budget-focused retreat. So mostly, I just want to do like a brief overview here of what the work that staff is doing to prepare you to make those decisions and make sure that there's no gaps, that we have information that you want to make sure we cover, those types of things. So after a fabulous icebreaker that
Fabulous.
will top last year's personality test, I'm sure, and breakfast burritos, Director Flick will go over the FY25 budget. This is the same information that you received a couple of finance committee meetings ago, but it's always good to have it at the top of your mind and kind of know our overall position. After that, this lovely panel here is planning on a review of general fund services by department for you. And so the purpose of this is really to just look at general fund, because that's, I mean, it's a shame, but this, remember, this isn't our budget retreat. This is actually your retreat. So this sounds a lot like your budget retreat that actually happens in April, but because you have to give me budget direction now so that I can give the department heads budget direction, we're talking about a whole lot of budget stuff. And so we have organized a presentation that is by service. So it's organized by department, but really we've asked department heads to talk about each service so that you can understand each service that we deliver and how it's supported by general fund. And the idea there is that when you look at it from a service delivery level, you can think about, okay, if I want to make cuts to that service, this is what that would look like. And we will provide some context for you as far as, like, you know, I use the transit example all the time, and it was brought up in Public Works and Facilities Committee today. What does the service reduction look like in transit? So basing that off of those priority-based budgeting exercise, just because that is how this body had organized it before, we have probably just about 80 different slides to move through and a 2-hour time block, and we want you to ask questions because the purpose of this is for you to ask questions. So we're going to be practicing to make sure that we give you the information that you need to give direction. You know, when we look at the general fund budget that's impacted, or if you kind of take out schools, right, you narrow down the areas where you can find that revenue reduction. After that, we have we're hoping to give you a break for lunch. Still tense debate between salad and soup versus taco bar, so stay tuned.
More pizzas.
You may be surprised. After lunch, Ashley and her team have provided a.
Madam Manager,
yeah.
can we stop? We have a few different people than we had last year. Is there anybody has allergies or anything that we should be aware of? I have an allergy to sandwiches. Okay, sorry. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Just a fiber allergy.
No, there's fiber in pizza.
A green allergy.
After Ashley has prepared just a plan for you to review, that is our outreach strategy to the public. Because you're gonna have to give me direction on how to formulate the budget, but then we also know that you wanna ask the public about reductions that they want to see, services they value, and really trying to get from this exercise some core values information. So we have, you know, a survey, we have different tools, focus groups, those types of things. So trying to get input from you to make sure that we're covering the constituencies that you want to make sure we reach out to make sure that we're using the tools that you want us to reach out to, the tools that you want us to use, to make sure that we're giving you the information in a timely manner, right? So that you can use it to make your budget decisions. And probably the most important question that we will ask you is, how do you plan on using this information? Because when we go and ask the public to give us their time and attention, we will be leaning on that. And then probably the meatiest part of the day is going to be giving the manager that specific direction. And so we're really trying to frame it for you with some different options as far as you know, giving the manager direction to manage lapse, giving the manager direction to, you know, as we talked about the last AFC, you know, budget prudently and what that looks like. We want to talk a little bit about phased cuts, right? Do you want to look at phased cuts? So, because we have imperfect information, and what does that look like? And the idea being that we come out of that process with a number based on this year's budget that you are comfortable with asking the public to do that, that exercise with, right? 'Cause, I mean, obviously, if we were to go out there and ask the public, like, hey, we want, $12 million plus an anticipated $6 million in inflation, and you're gonna have to make all those cuts. Like, that might be, the reality is that number's probably between 0 and, whatever, $16 million, right? That you are gonna feel comfortable, that's defensible. So I think that's gonna be a big question that is gonna take up some time and require input. And then we have a couple of hours reserved for assembly goals. This is usually all this retreat is assembly goals. So it's a little bit difficult to try to squeeze that in 2 hours. We have asked department heads to give us updates, and then we've sent all those updates to you, and then have asked you to give us any suggestions or changes by the end of today. And I know we have heard from a couple of you, a few of you, 3 is few, a couple is 2. And what we plan on doing is a format similar to last year, where we take those recommendations in a kind of a go goal by goal, with staff giving you input on, like, if a goal has been, Title 49 rewrite is a great example of, like, well, we've done the next tranche, so now we need to do the next step in it. So that would be a case where I would give you amended language as a suggestion based on the progress that we've made. There may be goals that your colleagues have recommended changing or removing. We would bring those up in that process too and go through those goals. So that is kind of, we've been working with the mayor on organizing that. I'm sure she has some context to add, and of course Director Flick is doing the yeoman's work of pulling all this together.
The only context I have, we're assuming that a lot of people didn't submit changes in the implementing actions because of realizing that we're going to have our hands full. And I do know, I have not seen what people have submitted because I can't do that, but I do know the general feeling is remove, 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 just because of the time that we're going to spend on the budget, and we know that we only have so much time. But if you just are dying to submit something and you forgot over Thanksgiving and ate too much turkey, we could get it to tomorrow, but that's our last day because the staff has to have the time to compile it. So send them to Mr. Barr if you really wanted to weigh in on something. If not, then, like I said, we'll assume that nobody really has any substantial changes, other than we may be looking at removing stuff or keeping everything the same and knowing that we're going to work on our budget and GLOF, because those are our 2 favorite subjects. All right, with that, Ms. Flick, Director Flick, sorry, do you want to add anything?
I'll just add that, we'll, in preparing visuals and options, we're going to try to make it as simple as possible, because this is going to be a super complex conversation to have. So we want to make sure we give you enough details and lots of things to think about, but not overwhelm you with so many details that we can't get to the direction that the manager needs. And really that I need you to give the manager so I can write her direction to the directors. So we'll try to walk that balance of big concepts, good options, but also sufficient detail for you.
Right. And if you know of questions that you're going to ask ahead of time, please ask them now so they can put that in their presentations, because chances are if you have that question, other people have the same question. So, Madam Manager, you can finish this off.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just will also note that we have a lot of presentations prepared, but we don't have any packet materials because we are going to be working through this and tweaking things. We may have a couple of memos. We haven't quite decided on that to help organize your thoughts. But in general, the bulk of the information will be at the retreat. And that's usually how we do retreats. So I just wanted to let you know that before you're like, where's my 200-page packet?
Yeah. Typically, we just have the finance sheets that we have in the budget review is part of our packet. Does anybody else need anything before then? I don't know if we need to have our overview that Robert gave us of our social services grants or if we need our assembly priorities or anything like that. Anybody else need anything? Okay, looks like we're just gonna get our finance pieces of paper. Go ahead, Ms. Hall.
We need to bring anything with us that you've already provided us previously.
I don't think so. I mean, we will make sure if there's anything that we plan on referencing, we have a couple of copies. Bring your laptop if if you're comfortable working from that.
Mr. Burks.
Thank you. On the summarize of the grants list that you got us is for the, for the 2025 year, and it's just based off of what was given in that year and what may be remaining. Is there a way to get like a comprehensive financials on those organizations to see what like their total holdings are, or assets and revenues and things like that?
That's probably not the detail we'll go in on Saturday, just so you know. This is just a general overview on the budget, and I would think that we're going to deal with that as we progress through the budget.
Madam Mayor?
Go ahead, Mrs. Flick.
Not for Saturday, but for the January, February, March AFC meetings, we do intend to have partner agencies present during Assembly Finance Committee. And we've asked them to not just talk about what the programs do, but to be prepared to talk about their financial picture and not just what CBJ has granted them, but the larger picture. So the partner agencies you will see in January, February, and March, we'll space them out.
Does that make sense, Mr. Burks? So basically our goals, if we had goals for this thing, is putting in our head some of our services that we might consider decreasing because of what we're having, but we probably won't do that. They're just going to let us know what these services are, so we can be thinking about that in the back of our head, looking at our communications and engagement plan to make sure that's where we want to go, giving general budget direction to the manager, and then working on our goals. So the hard-working, detailed stuff will come through finances, and Ms. Wall will do a fine job with that in finance. I'm just the pitch hitter today. All right, any questions? So airport, Alaska room. All of you should have your little thing to get in and out of the airport for your parking. Please be rested, ready to go. 8:30 is when the door is open and breakfast, but if you whip through the door at 9 o'clock, you'll still be able to eat breakfast. So, any more direction other than tacos or sandwiches? Tacos.
Assemblymember Hall, that is far too an important decision to leave to staff.
What should we do? Just a little quick thing. Ms. Atkinson, make a motion.
On tacos or sandwiches? Okay, I move that we have tacos and ask for unanimous consent. Actually, I'm just going to move that we do that.
Any objection to tacos?
Nope, not entertaining
Mr.
objections.
Kelly?
I prefer, as much as I enjoy tacos, it won't be Tuesday.
Dude, it's so hot in this room. Let's wrap it up.
Okay.
All right, I'll just leave it there.
Okay, so we're not taking a formal vote, but it looks like we only have one person. So if you want a sandwich, bring a sandwich. Otherwise, we're getting tacos. Or you can make them into nachos like I'm going to do. Does that answer your question? All questions? Some tea would be nice, some caffeinated tea. Okay, see that we're starting to get squirrely. So Saturday we'll all see each other, but for the next meeting for finance is January 7th. We are adjourned.